A physics genius builds a time machine to trap his girlfriend in a loop. Strap in, movie enthusiasts. It's recap time. Today, I bring you one more recap, the science fiction movie called Time Freak. There will be some spoilers ahead, so watch out and enjoy the recap. The film opens with a text conversation between Debbie and Stillman, a couple on the verge of a breakup. Debbie tells Stillman to come to their regular hanging spot, for she has something to address. Stillman, a physics genius and an overall intellectual young man, assumes Debbie's calling to break up. Just as he had predicted, Debbie shows up and bluntly states that she wants to break up with him, but on a mutual understanding. Despite knowing they have conflicting differences, Stillman isn't ready to part ways or give up. As a shocking revelation, he takes out a temp pad, a creation of his, to reset time and convince Debbie to stay multiple times. However, he messes up the possibility of getting Debbie to stay each time. He ends up letting her go and coming back home, which is more of a lair where he keeps his inventions and discoveries. There, he calls his friend Evan for urgent help. Unlike Stillman, Evan is a junkie and an overeater with a lousy lifestyle. At the lair, Stillman introduces Evan to a complete timeline track of his relationship with Debbie, which he controls through a self-invented remote. He tells Evan that he's marked all his good moments with Debbie with a smiley face and red dots to represent all the bad times that, in his opinion, may have contributed to their breakup. Evan finds it awfully sad and tells Stillman to not be too hard on himself, but Stillman continues to freak Evan out with his inventions. He rewinds the timeline to the day he met Debbie and instantly fell in love with her. The scene cuts to a flashback in which Stillman is solving a complex physics equation on his class board. No one in class, including his teacher, is interested in what Stillman's doing, so the teacher cuts his time and ends the class. Subsequently, Evan shows up and forces him to tag along to a party his friend Debbie has arranged at the bar where she is working her last day. At the bar, Stillman and Evan sit alone in the corner, where Debbie gets their order, which is someone else's. The clumsy Debbie apologizes and leaves to get the right order. A friend of hers, who is very touchy with her, chugs the drink without using his hands, which gives Stillman the wrong idea about Debbie. Evan addresses the elephant in the room, confirming her friend is gay. Stillman becomes immediately attracted to her, but at the same time, he knows he has no chance with a girl as pretty as Debbie, considering he's a dork. He takes out his notebook and continues working on his temporal consistency theory, which he's been working on for quite some time. Evan takes the notebook away and encourages him to go and talk to Debbie, who's serving her last day as a bartender. Stillman musters the courage to approach her and initiate a normal conversation, which doesn't go as well as he had planned in his head due to their completely different views on studies and careers. Whereas he is work-driven and likes everything planned, Debbie discloses that she's a musician with no career and that she would like to go with the flow, learn from the journey, and accept what destiny has planned for her. When Debbie's touchy friend walks in, Stillman immediately leaves the bar with Evan. In the parking lot, Stillman assesses that Evan is high on some drugs and is not fit to drive. Hence, he gets out of the car and decides to take a lift from another college mate named Andy, Evan's opponent in the frisbee match. Simultaneously, Debbie finds Stillman's notebook on his table, so she rushes to the parking lot to hand it over to him. There, Evan puts his car in reverse gear and unintentionally hits Stillman with his car. Debbie freaks out and runs to see if Stillman is fine, whereas Stillman finds Debbie near him very romantic. Suddenly, he is struck by a new theorem that can help him make time travel possible, so he immediately gets up, holds the notebook against Debbie's chest, and starts writing it down. Debbie immediately becomes attracted to the static manner in which Stillman invents a whole new equation. This cuts to the present time, in which Stillman starts showing his conflicting moments with Debbie. Some of the moments include an insulting remark on Debbie's music lyrics and the passing of a homophobic insult to Debbie's gay friend, who makes fun of his selected movie at the movie night. In the current time, Stillman cuts to chase and shows Evan the time machine he's built using the theorem. He was struck within the parking lot. He requests that Evan join him on the quest to revisit all the bad moments that led to his breakup. Evan freaks out and tries to convince Stillman to move on from Debbie, as things have taken a dark turn. He also believes there is no such concept as time travel. Stillman proves him wrong by claiming there is an elastic temporal quality to all pre-existing phenomena, which can bend time however one likes with the right equipment. When Evan creates great panic, Stillman gives an emotional speech on why Debbie is the finest girl out there for him, and convinces Evan to join him on his mission to save his relationship. Now Stillman sets the coordinates of the bar where he first met Debbie on his phone's app that's connected to the time machine, which helps them travel back to day one. Stillman and Evan find themselves in their old bodies, meaning only their minds have traveled to their old selves. In excitement, Evan keeps requesting to reset the time to when the universe came into existence, but Stillman explains how his machine can help him visit the only places he has already been to. As they're talking, they watch Debbie get their order wrong, which makes Stillman nervous and doubtful of the whole mission. However, Evan supports him and tells him to go along with the plan. After going through the entire meetup situation, they set the coordinates in his phone app and travel to the movie night, where he insulted Debbie's friends. He sets the time before the movie starts, which makes Evan scream out loud because he had also found the movie moving boring back then. However, he covers the situation and doesn't reveal what he and Stillman are up to. After rewatching the entire film multiple times, Stillman somehow ends up insulting Debbie's friends and disappointing her. After many takes, he settles the situation by buying free pizza for Debbie's friends for not liking the movie. As Stillman puts the next coordinates on his phone app, Stillman becomes bummed because he's busy pampering his hair and making sure the old Evan studies well for his grades while playing a video game. Which is ironic. Stillman ignores his wishes and sets the new location anyway. Before jumping on to the next event, Evan records his old self a very harsh message to encourage him to get good grades and get his life together. This time, he travels to a good memory, in which he leaves Evan in the elevator and takes the stairs with Debbie to go to a rooftop party. On the rooftop, they find out that there was no party. As they're about to leave, the door gets locked, which triggers Debbie's fear of being trapped. Stillman saves the night by taking out a pocket knife and opening the lock, which Debbie finds very attractive. He keeps repeating the moment, which doesn't end well for Evan, who gets stuck in a crowded elevator. He immediately calls Stillman and tells him to knock it off. When Stillman stops repeating the moment, the raging Evan shows up to the rooftop and points out he's wasting time on moments he didn't even plan to fix, yet he refuses to squeeze time to fix his messy parts along the way. Stillman apologizes and sets the time to the night he mistook Debbie's song lyrics the first time she played in front of him. Somehow, he keeps taking the wrong approach and tries to rewind the time, but his phone app glitches and stops working. Moments later, Evan shows up at his place, explaining how he found himself in his old body, which was stoned and didn't have his house key. Debbie sees Evan talking about his drugs, so she invites him in to get stoned with him since Stillman is giving her a bad time. As Debbie gets high with Evan, Stillman fixes the phone app. Evan also comes in handy and unintentionally resolves their difference over Debbie's song lyrics, which Stillman appreciates. He ends up telling Debbie about his time travel quest to save their dying relationship since she's high and will forget the conversation when he'll resets time. Next, they show up at the bar where Debbie plays for the first time and gets offered a weekly gig, which puts her in a dilemma of whether to take the offer or not. She asks Stillman for his suggestion, but his opinion had led to a conflict last time, so this time Stillman stays silent, resulting in Debbie getting happy and making the decision on her own. At the bar, Evan flirts with a girl and fails miserably. He also comes across his arch-nemesis Andy, who makes him feel inferior after winning the frisbee match. Hence, Evan requests that Stillman let him fix a moment, to which Stillman agrees. Stillman stands on the side and resets time every time Evan loses. In the end, he intervenes, teaches him the right moves after observing for a while, and gets Evan to win the match. Before leaving, Evan sees the girl he flirted with at the bar and runs to her. He flirts with her again and says horrible things to her, hoping Stillman will reset time and use the next turn to impress her. Unfortunately, the phone app breaks down and stops working, creating great panic among Stillman and Evan. Stuck in the timeline, Stillman stays the night at Debbie's. There, he fixes the time pad, but the resetting time or going back option gets removed. He calls Evan, who reveals that he's currently studying at the library after changing his major subject to psychology since he realized he's good with people and studying their behaviors. Stillman meets up with him and shares his concerns about the time pad on his phone, but Evan doesn't find it an issue, believing they were to move forward anyway. Now, they set the time for the last bad event, which is a party hosted by Debbie's friends. Last time, Stillman was provoked by seeing Debbie dance with her male friends, who were touchy, and got into a huge argument with Debbie. This time, he tries his best to blend in and avoid any drama because he does not have the chance to reset time. Thankfully, he gets through the night without fighting and wakes up to see Debbie's last text about discussing their breakup gone. He goes outside of the camps and screams at the top of his lungs in excitement. He calls Evan, who is being offered to shower together with the girl he was flirting all along, after helping her shift to a new place. He begs Stillman to stay a little longer, but Stillman pushes the button, which pulls Evan back too. In the current time, they find the time machine gone since Stillman focused on fixing his relationship instead of the time machine. Subsequently, he calls Debbie, goes to her place, and makes out with her in joy. That day, he decides to treat Debbie to a fancy dinner at a fancy place on his birthday. He tells Debbie to show up at 8 p.m., but she shows up an hour late, saying her phone wasn't charged and she forgot the timing Stillman had given her. Stillman becomes disappointed since his table at the restaurant gets taken away by someone else. The two end up in a cheap local diner, where the waitress serves him a single waffle with a candlelight. Stillman goes to Evan, who is working at a furniture shop, and expresses how he's not happy even after fixing everything. Aside from complaining about how bad his life turned out, he tells Stillman to make the best of his life and normalize arguing since it's a part of nature. That night, he goes back home and apologizes to Debbie for his behavior, and she apologizes back. However, this doesn't stop him from going back to his base and starting to work on building another time machine from scratch. Cut to 2 years later, Stillman and Debbie are seen married and living in a fancy house after their graduation. They have invited their friend over. Evan is also there with his girlfriend, who happens to be the girl he flirted with while Stillman was on his quest to mend his broken relationship. Debbie goes to check up on the food she's made, her friends, and realizes she's burned it all. Stillman gets a silent breakdown, which leads him to go down to his basement and use the new time machine to go back in time and save the food Debbie just burned. He comes back with the food, which raises Evan's suspicion. His suspicions are confirmed when, on his way out, Stillman breaks the news about Debbie's first music album reveal. Evan becomes excited and asks Debbie some more questions. That's when Debbie tells how everything happened all of a sudden, and how she got a series of phone calls from people who wanted to work with her. Evan doesn't say anything and leaves. Left alone, Debbie shares how she's not excited about making music and doesn't find anything amusing anymore. Just as this wasn't alarming for Stillman, later that night, Debbie confesses to Stillman that she's noticing that they never have a fight or any argument. She feels that arguing or disagreements are something normal in a relationship, and since they're not having any fights, she's finding it weird and abnormal. The next morning, Stillman runs to Evan, who is now a yoga therapist helping a small group of people heal. Stillman barges into his place and takes him elsewhere to talk. He reveals how his constant time reset is affecting Debbie's mental health, but Evan tells him to go through this situation as all couples do and not take any big action. Stillman admits to using the time machine for any small inconvenience that is now interfering with his life. However, Evan plays his card right and sends Stillman away with the thought of tackling difficult situations without using his time machine. Later that night, Debbie sits down with Stillman, where she doubts herself and suggests having babies because she feels like she can bring the spark back to her boring life. Believing she's the one at fault, Debbie thinks having kids will solve her problem and bring back that energy to carry things. Stillman stays quiet, knowing he's guilty. Debbie sleeps on his lap that night, but Stillman has trouble sleeping. The next morning, he wakes up with the idea of going back in time and never inventing a time machine to put an end to his tasteless life and put Debbie out of her misery. Before he can do that, Evan aggressively knocks on his door and warns him not to destroy the time machine because he's been secretly using it too. He confesses to Stillman that he kept sneaking into his house to see the time machine for his use and reset the time, due to which Stillman forgot about his intrusions every time. Stillman becomes angry and shuts the door in his face. As he's going down in his base, Debbie opens the door for Evan. He runs inside and stops Stillman from going into the base, resulting in both of them falling down the stairs like a cannonball. The two aggressively debate why they should or shouldn't destroy the concept of time travel. Debbie comes down after hearing the commotion and finds out what Stillman's doing with her life. When Stillman confesses he's been doing it for over 60 to 70 years to keep Debbie with him, she gets a meltdown. As she's constantly nagging, Stillman starts the machine and goes back in time to never invent the idea and restart his life from that point. Evan jumps along with him and time travels too. The two travel back to the parking lot where Stillman was hit by Evan's car and invented his theorem. Like the old time, Evan tries to run Stillman over with his car so he can invent his theorem again, but Stillman dodges well. After a long chase, the two end up in a small stadium, where Stillman pulls a trick to stop Evan by crashing his car. He pulls Evan out of the car and tells him there's no going back in real life, since he didn't bring his phone to take them back to real life. The two make their peace with the current situation and move on. Outside their college, they find Debbie showing up to give Stillman the notebook he left at the bar. Stillman takes the notebook from Debbie and says goodbye by giving her a kiss. While she finds it out of the ordinary, the future Debbie uses the time machine and shows up in her old body. She immediately tells Stillman to stop and starts up a huge fight. She makes Stillman realize his irreversible mistakes, to which Stillman admits and apologizes. After resolving their differences, Stillman walks away, thinking it's over, but Debbie pulls him back and asks if he wants to start over once again, hinting that she wants to time travel and fix things her way. Here, the film ends. I hope you liked the story recap. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.